Yep, we are streaming. Good
All right. Good evening,
evening.
everybody.
Oh, you want to do the intro? Yeah, go
Happy
ahead.
Friday. Happy election week, because clearly it's been longer than a day. Welcome to Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. We have a lot of people going through a lot of thoughts right now, but so we're giving some people a break here. There's only 4 of us tonight, but it's a really strong group of people with a lot to say. So we are joined tonight by Dwight Patel, the doctor himself, myself, Jackie Saxton, Jeff Thornton, and Christopher Stock. Chris Stock, also affectionately known as Gordon Ramsay II. So we're going to get right into it. Clearly probably about the only thing we're going to be talking about today is the election, what's happened, what hasn't happened, where do we go from here, and what are we doing looking ahead? So obviously, let's start off with everyone's initial thoughts on really what's going on. And we are spread out across the country. Obviously, Dwight and myself are in Maryland. Chris, you're in North Carolina, which, although it hasn't been called yet, I think we're all pretty sure is going to stay for President Trump. Whether or not that makes a difference, we shall see. And Jeff, remind me again, you are in...
I'm in Maryland. I was in Flint, Michigan, but yes, I moved this year.
He's culturally Michigan now because he moved. He was Maryland, then he moved to Michigan. Lived in Michigan for many moons.
All right,
yeah, moved in Maryland,
Michigan expert.
And Don Irvine is going to jump on. So good, we got our 5.
So Chris, I do better intros than Jackie, right?
I'm sorry, I don't drag our intros on for 10 minutes.
You know what, Dwight? I mean, she's giving me the compliment every time of Gordon Ramsay. So at this point, I don't really know who to side with.
I may pull that depending on the first time I try something that you cook. So
So let's see. Today is the 4th day of the rest of your elections, everyone. Lot is up in the air. It's kind of like what is it? The Smothers Brothers yo-yo. What was the yo-yo bit that?
Is that why you're trying to juggle? It's up in the
air. Yeah.
What is this?
One of the Smothers Brothers used to talk about the yo-yo and President Reagan's defense policies. But anyways, that's for another day.
Okay, wait a minute. Smothers Brothers. I mean, really honestly, it's like, who on this panel is going to remember the Smothers Brothers?
They had a show in the 80s.
Smuckers, like
I know the brand.
Don, at this point, when most things that Dwight says, I just kind of sit there and smile and act like I know exactly what he's talking about.
That's actually the smart thing to do.
No, but Don, the Smothers Brothers did have a show in the 80s. That's what I know from that. I don't remember the first run of the Smothers Brothers in the 60s and 70s. Didn't they come on Hawaii Five-0?
Guys, are we really going to waste the hour that we're live with everything going on talking about the Smothers Brothers?
That was just Smothers Brothers. I know nothing, so this is new for me, and I'd like to know.
I couldn't let that go because Dwight has this thing about throwing in these really references.
Did they do like
any reference is fair game?
Yeah, they did a guest spot on Hawaii Five-0, if I remember correctly. They were playing.
Please tell me about what's going on in the election, because I really am genuinely curious.
Yes.
From you guys.
All right, so we're done with all that stuff.
Yes, election.
And let's move on. So question number 1 is really is like, why did Trump lose? I mean, I think now it's pretty much don't we feel it's pretty much said and done. There's that. This is it, that we're going to move on to a president-elect Biden.
It is 2020, so I'm not ruling anything out. I mean, I think a lot of, at least within the young Republicans, we're going to let whatever happens play out on that front. For us, we're really focused on looking ahead and focusing on helping in the runoff in Georgia. But if we are going to approach this hypothetical question of why did Trump lose, I think that we're looking at, and there was a really profound talk yesterday. I'm really totally blanking on the guy's name on Fox last night, who was saying this was really a vote of love versus hate. You had the people who love Donald Trump and the people who hate Donald Trump. Not the people who love Joe Biden, because I don't think those people actually exist, but the people who hate Donald Trump. And was this really a case of hate outweighing love? And is that what happened here? Obviously, there's the prevailing thought amongst a lot of people on the right of why did Trump lose being, voter fraud. But unless, and of course, while I do think that there is definitely fraud out there, unless they can really produce some hardcore evidence, I don't think that that's the only thing that we can count on for being that many votes turning the tide here.
Right. I tell you this one, I will say this, I'll start off with this. Philadelphia, I'm sorry, there was a lot of voter fraud going on in Philadelphia. I just can't for the life of me believe what they're saying. I'm not buying what they're selling, quite frankly. Pennsylvania, I think it goes back to, I remember back 2000 in Florida, it was all the Democrat counties. They were perfectly fine using a butterfly ballot. And honestly, I really think one thing we need to nip in the bud, as Barney Fife would say, is mail-in ballots. Quite frankly, if you can go to Costco's, if you can go to Home Depot, if you can go to your supermarket, you can go and vote on election day. I'm sorry, if you can't, you will give you early voting, even though I don't like early voting. If you can't manage to vote in some states, like you guys had 3 weeks of early voting, right, Chris, in North Carolina?
Two.
Yeah. Virginia had early voting starting in September, and it went to the end of October. Well over a month.
Before we go forward, I do want to point out Facebook is saying no video, so I'm not entirely sure if they're actually live. Maybe
we're live on YouTube and Facebook. I'm able to share it, but every time I try to,
it says no video, guys. I think we might be being censored as we speak.
On Facebook, I would not be. Would we put that really past? I mean, is this something Facebook is above doing?
Jack, you mentioned that's going to be a rabbit hole for Dwight here.
You're just opening up Pandora's box here, and
no, Stephen Barrett likes
references. It's going to be a whole thing.
No, we're on. Stephen Barrett just agreed. He likes what's going on.
Okay,
well, cool. Okay. Well, at least you're censored on my Facebook. It doesn't want me to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, basically. But my point is this: Pennsylvania. I think there's can be made a case about Wisconsin and Michigan. I mean, these are all happening. I mean, what I find it really hard. It's kind of like my bag of M&Ms theory, right? Don, you take a bag of chocolate M&Ms. You're definitely going to get at least 1 or 2 green M&Ms, right? In Pennsylvania, it's every box of ballots. Oh my God, this whole box is for Joe Biden. I don't buy that. Whereas there needs to be at least 1 or 2. I mean, there should be at least 1 or 2 or 5 or 20 green M&Ms in that box of ballots, quite frankly, which would be votes for President Trump. I mean, if that were the case, Biden would have gotten 100% of the vote in Baltimore City. He did not. He would have gotten 100% of the vote in Prince George's County. He did not. And the fact that, I mean, first of all, this smells of fraud and crime. This is the Chicago way. This is, who's Joe Biden's mentor, Barack Obama. And this is all the Chicago way. And it is fraud. I really, but we are the party of law and order, the Republicans. We will accept the results of a fair election with every legal vote counted. We're not going to be like Joe Lieberman and Al Gore, who basically whined for 8 years about how they were stolen from the president. The presidency was stolen from them.
I understand your point there, Dwight, but I think what Jackie's point is probably a little bit more closer to the truth. Let me say, in terms of that. Look, I think we can all agree that there's, like in any election, especially in this one, we've got 144 million votes have now been tallied. So that's a lot of votes. And there's always going to be a certain percentage of those for various reasons that are going to be incorrect, that are fraudulent, the mistakes in there. Mm-hmm. We know, I think that, this is definitely, if there's any mm-hmm. fraud, if you want to call it that goes on here, or blatant thing, it is really how the Democrats set this election up on the mail-in balloting, which is their advantage, and they could manipulate that or do a lot of other things with that. But the votes are the votes. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't work in an election office, but I mean, if ballots come in, they come in. Maybe they're all arranged by party or whatever, or when they're in the box. But we know, like in Philly, I mean, that's a heavily Democratic area. They're going to vote overwhelmingly for Joe Biden. What I think throws people off a lot with the election process is just that the votes that are reported on election night, particularly under these cases, is very uneven. If you get the early voting and the in-person voting first, and then you get the mail-in balloting second last, then you're going to have lots of wild skews here, where the people that favor, that are voting for Trump, that voted early or voted in person, their votes come in rapid, and we see those big numbers come up. But if the mail-in ballots that are coming secondarily to be counted, and they're coming from heavily Democrat areas, and we know the Democrats are very organized when it came to the mail-in balloting, that skews the numbers, the other numbers come in heavily. I'm just bothered by these long periods, these extensions that we have that, you know, Dwight, there's no doubt. I am 100% in agreement with you in the sense of the deadline should be election day, election night. That's it. Whatever is there, whatever they have in their office by mail or whatever, those are the valid votes. Those are the ballots that need to be counted. Anything that arrives the day after, I don't care when the postmark is like, look, I don't think people should have any problem mailing in their ballot. You know, when I look at how my Maryland ballot went, I mean, I applied fairly early for my Maryland ballot, and it took them weeks to get me the ballot. My wife came back from a trip, and then I finally got her to send hers in. She got hers back within about 5 days.
Yeah, Don, I had the same. I applied for my ballot very, very early on in the process. I got it, I think, the first week of October. And I physically dropped it off when I came back to Maryland mid-October. And I only got the email on election day saying your vote has been received and counted. And Don, I'm sorry I did cut you off here, but my dad actually has been saying this for months is this is what's going to happen with this amount of mail-in voting, that they're miraculously going to find enough votes for either side, depending on who's up. They're going to miraculously find enough votes on either side overnight to flip the election over into the other direction. And whichever side loses is not going to accept the results of the election. He's been calling this for months, and I think that we'd be in the same situation if the roles were reversed and that it was Biden up all this time, and then all of a sudden overnight it flipped to Trump. I think that we'd still be in the same situation. It's unfortunate. I think that a lot of people did see this coming, but and you weren't on when we were talking a little bit before the show, but I had been saying I think the biggest issue we face now is not who's in the White House, but is that if we're combining the rhetoric from 4 years ago, or for the previous 4 years, that people on the left believe that there is the possibility for other countries to interfere in our elections, and now the prevailing narrative now, which from the right, that there is a large possibility
Chinese collusion
of large amounts of voter fraud in the U.S. elections. What you're looking at is an overwhelming majority of the population who does not trust that we have safe and valid elections. And that's what's going to be the issue moving forward, is could this be the new normal of the side who doesn't win the election every single 4 years, challenging the votes, claiming that there's something wrong?
And I think that is kind of that Pandora's box. I mean, we're talking about that with all these other things, but Chris, I mean, this opens up a whole lot of things. I mean, not just for 2024, but I mean, every election of 2022, 2024, 2026, every 2 years, we're going through this, and we've got to figure out a way to fix this, because this is just, this is not the way, we should be working. This is not the way this country operates. And this is a disaster for us. And it can only get worse, I think, going on here if we don't find a better fix to this going forward. I mean, Jeff, you've been quiet. I mean, I think we need your 2 cents here. And Chris, you haven't really said much either, so.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, we talked a little bit before the show started about this, and I'm with Jackie, is that my biggest fear is that if the American people feel that the electoral system is being undermined, either from without or within, or they lose trust in it, that really strikes at the core of our democracy. I mean, that is really the core principle, is that everyone has one person, one vote. That's kind of what we're built on. And so if there really are accusations even of voter fraud, those need to be investigated. But to suggest that there is systemic problems with the voting system is a dangerous path unless it really is substantiated, because I think it lends towards people having even less faith in the political system. And it's hard enough to get people to care about casting a vote. But if they feel like, well, now it's like, both sides saying that it's they're cheating on both sides. Again, that just undermines the participation of the public as a whole in the system. So that's my biggest concern.
All right, Chris, I want you to get in here, because then I want to ask another question.
No, you're fine. Absolutely. I mean, I agree. I mean, it's hard to disagree, but I think going back to the crux of the question here is why we thought Trump presumably has lost. I mean, there's nothing more you can point to in the fact that voter turnout was higher than ever before in light of everything that was going on right now with the country and the pandemic, but also because of the 4 years and the rhetoric that's come along with the Trump administration. I mean, you're going to have your diehards that are going to be out there and they're going to be voting for Trump. And then you're going to have everyone else that disagrees with Trump is going to be out of the polls for the sole reason that they disagree with Trump. It has nothing to do with Joe Biden. And I think Democrats knew that. I mean, he hasn't presented, and I would argue with anyone on this point, is that if you could tell me a platform with Joe Biden that is substantially different than the status quo right now, something that's radical, something that's different, a different plan in place, I'd be very surprised, because I haven't seen that. And there's really no Biden supporter that is out and supporting that candidate for the sole purpose of the candidate. They're only out there supporting them, and they're only out there voting is because they hate Trump. And listen, that's fine. I mean, to each their own. And I completely understand anybody else that feels a different way, but that's why he's presumably lost here. It has nothing to do with Joe Biden. And the Democrats knew that. That's why I think that's really gets down to the heart of it as to why Joe Biden became the nominee.
And you were right on the money there.
You have a nominee that you know is going to be a safe candidate, that people know on name recognition. There's not many high expectations with people to prove anything. And you've got a president that most people feel very strongly one way or the other. So he stayed hidden throughout the entire early part of this campaign and did presumably close to nothing. And then we've just seen the results of it that's come in. Now, to touch on what we've been talking about with fraud, I mean, it's really hard, and you got to walk a fine line, because I think we touched on it before, because we're getting at the heart of our voting system, is that it's really hard to sit there and say there's fraud, this is fraud. Voter fraud is a very particular thing, and there's no doubt in my mind that maybe there's instances where something like that could have happened or is continuing to happen right now. I'm not ruling out any possibility, which I really think is the interesting point. What we'll see now in the next couple of weeks as to where these legal claims go in the court system, because presumably, if you're asking me, I don't foresee anything coming out of the state court system where these suits are filed that is going to be pro-Trump on any ruling. And I don't think we've seen that so far, is that the injunctions to hold up votes have been pretty much dismissed to this point, mostly for the fact that they don't have very many legal grounds to stop anything like this from happening. So we need to really see kind of some direct evidence that comes out. Now, do I think that can happen? Absolutely, I do. But I don't see it so far. It's just a matter of right now to see kind of where things go. But I think what all of this really stems from at the end of the day is just distrust. And there's a lack of oversight, and there's a lack of any sort of public transparency and public involvement in this process. Is that we knew going into this how uncertain some things like absentee ballots and mail-in voting, what they would cause. What we had seen is we've seen slow reporting coming out of certain states that just so happen to be purple battleground states with high voter turnout, and that we're seeing a very slow matriculation of these votes coming in that are substantially swaying the one candidate's lead over a very long period of time. And there's no real rationale reasoning to understand why that's happening in most people's eyes.
And Chris, and one quick interjection to add to that also was the fact that in a lot of these places where you saw that big dump that flipped things in the other person's favor into Biden's favor, is that in a lot of those cities there was also a temporary pause, an unexplained pause in the count for whatever reason. I think in Georgia they said it was
we saw that with Atlanta, and I think it was the Atlanta area. One of their main precincts over there was a water main break that just so happens to not affect any of the ballots with a water main break, but delayed voting or the counting of votes. So you know what, and I'll sum it up on this, is that kind of where my big issue comes to be with this counting, is that we're seeing a complete and total pause in North Carolina, by the way, and I will talk on that a little bit later, which is concerning as a whole. But I have a hard time understanding how there's 9 million absentee ballots that happen to be counted in the state of Texas. And we have gotten reports back very quickly as compared to some of these other states that we're now trying to wait and see results on, with 1,000, couple hundred margin when it comes between two candidates and the result of the election. For instance, North Carolina has 5 million absentee votes that they've accounted for right now. We haven't finished them. Georgia has 4. They haven't finished them. Texas has 9. They're done. So that's kind of where I'm looking at this issue and saying that it doesn't have anything to do, and you can't really point to the fact that these are mail-in ballots that need to be verified. They're absentee ballots, and we don't know, and we have to go through the process to figure out which are valid and which aren't. When you're seeing states with higher volumes and arguably, in shorter time frames, get the public back the results that they're seeking in a more efficient and effective way. So it's really hard to buy the argument. And again, it goes into the skepticism with most people have, which of course I do. And I think any level-headed, person at this point is kind of looking at this and scratching their head. I mean, obviously, if you're on the other side of the partisan divide here, I'm sure you're thrilled. But you saw the writing on the wall as soon as everything got hung up overnight, where you're looking at 20+% that needs to come in, and we're not seeing things for 2 days, and the excuse is absentee or mail-in, and you're seeing states with higher volumes that have already got it done.
Yeah, so, and Chris Ron DeSantis, if you guys have watched anything that he said in the past 2 days, has been very similar to what you were saying. Is people are saying, you know, how come you guys were able to get your results out so quickly despite having, you know, they've had a lot of absentee mailing as well. And he's like, we learned our lesson after 2000, you know, we got our act together and we have a very smooth system now. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like
And
a lot of other states will learn a lot from what Florida has done.
And Jackie, something else that I think should be addressed is one of the things Ron DeSantis mentioned was Florida was pretty much done for President Trump around 10:30, but yet it didn't get called until the wee hours of the evening. I think it was early mornings when they called Florida. You know,
Right. But I don't think Florida had much of a real pause. I mean, they did have maybe a little bit of a time where you were waiting to see kind of where the number was going. But
Still coming in pretty steadily.
nothing, yeah, exactly. Nothing is comparable to what we're seeing is like in my state right now. We haven't actually had any numbers, it seems like, reported in almost 3 days. Like, honest to God, has been sitting here at 94, 95% with nothing moving, and the numbers fluctuating as to how many are outstanding.
Yeah, to your point too, I mean, you look at Virginia, and it was like red for the longest time, and then it suddenly flipped blue when Alexandria, reported in Fairfax County, we put all the the votes. So I mean, there's no way it's going to go red. There's just no way.
But that's they knew that going into it, right? It
but I
just
think
comes down to the fact that these battleground states is now we're sitting and waiting still.
Hey Chris, how are the local, like your House Representative? I know Madison Cawthorn's race was called early in the evening.
It was.
There was a number of states, number of districts, that we've got. We flipped from a Democrat to a Republican, and those results came in fairly early. Mm-hmm. And I know, and if you were to take those numbers, okay, if Joe Biden really was doing gangbusters like they're saying, and he's kind of, I find it hard to believe that we flipped so many, we're right now at +6 seats in the House right now. We might go up to +7 or 8 when everything's said and done. There is something fishy with the presidential ballot. I just don't, it doesn't correlate. I mean, you can't have, like New York City, okay, the suburbs, Congressman Peter King's seat, which I myself am pleasantly surprised that Andrew Garbarino won that seat. We held on to the Will Hurd seat. And yet, are we to believe that Joe Biden is, they didn't call Texas so very late in the night as well on election night. And Texas, like pretty much, we were running the tables in Texas. I mean, we won seats that, in theory, the Democrats, if they were doing so well, they should have. I mean, I think the future of pollsters coming down the pike is pretty much who's going to have faith in them anymore. I mean, nobody thought Susan Collins would win. I think a lot of people were writing the obituaries for Tom Tillis as well.
Well, I think too, your point, Christopher, I think, said it very well when it was like, it's for the primary election, for the presidency, it's a binary choice. It's either Trump or not Trump. For the House and Senate, it's not so binary. I mean, there are pros and cons for the different representatives. So, it's not like, if you're going to do a straight party line, every person does that. I mean, I've done things where I've voted for, people that weren't part of the party because I thought that they showed better representation for my interests. But again, that's just, that's just me, but it's a personal choice. I think in terms of people voting, you're going to see a lot more divergence when it comes to the congressional representatives than we do the presidential.
Yeah, that's been part of the thing. I mean, there in any presidential election, you're going to face a certain amount of ticket splitting anyway, for lots of various reasons. Going back to the early part of the show there, where Jackie was talking about kind of why people vote for Biden versus Trump. I mean, this was a big part of the narrative, I think, is that this is not about the fact that Joe Biden is a great candidate. We all know that he's not a good candidate. He was hiding. He didn't have to do anything. Between hiding out and just blaming Trump on COVID, you didn't have to do a whole lot of that. Trump did a lot of damage himself just by being Trump, because that's who he is. Trump is a very outspoken guy, and he wasn't going to change for anything, and that's his style, and that's fine. If you look at it, if you think, it is one of the things that's remarkable about this election is the fact that, not only has Biden, had 73 to 74 million votes, but Trump is over 70. We haven't seen these kinds of numbers. Trump has got more, he has more votes losing than any Republican in history, right?
Yeah.
That won the presidency. So this is how crazy. I mean, Jackie, you said 2020. I mean, like this is 2020. This is the reality of 2020.
But I think the most concerning thing, even on that point too, now, if we really want to dig into it, is the fact that now we're seeing what we're seeing. We're seeing the divide and different opinions and different speculations. And I think we all have to kind of make a conscious effort to walk and toe a fine line here as to figuring out what's real, what's not, what's rhetoric, what's accurate, where it's coming from, and who's the source. Because what we're going to see now is that we have record numbers in support of either candidate, which just means that you're going to have more people that are going to be more upset than ever in terms of how this finalizes here. And and unfortunately, I think it's going to be kind of a historic moment, obviously from everything we know about 2020 and a year as a whole, but it's going to be historic here moving forward, because I think public trust of our system is at an all-time low, unfortunately, right now.
Okay, and that goes back. That's one of the things I did want to ask the group in general in terms of the distance, but all this thing, did President Trump, do any damage to the system by all the rhetoric that he had about the fraud? I mean, he was pushing that before November 3rd. He was laying the groundwork, which gives him some of that impetus to file all these suits, which I think, as you alluded to, I mean, there's really not much basis there, legal basis, and they're going to be thrown out. So it's only delaying the inevitable in the long run at this point.
I don't think he did as much damage there, or any more damage there, as the pollsters have done in what he's claiming was in a way suppressing the vote on the right by saying it's going to be such a blue blowout. And quite honestly, a lot of people in politics on the left were saying blue tsunami, which and I think they're all in some ways still seeing this.
It wasn't even a blue derecho.
Right. I think they're still even seeing it as a loss, with they clearly didn't have the blue wave in Congress that they thought they would. But I think that he's doing more damage now, not to say that some of these lawsuits aren't justified, but I think without coming forward and saying, we're suing these states and here is our concrete evidence. I mean, they keep talking around that. And I think that's why this is currently coming out as more of a narrative of Trump as being a sore loser, rather than they have some legitimate claims here, because there's no evidence to back it up that has been brought forth publicly by anybody in power in the Trump campaign. I think that's why this is turning more into a situation of him doing more damage than good and making it look like he's just a sore loser.
Yeah, and here's the thing.
I mean, they're talking about escorting him off of the White House property at this
point. Folks calling the president a sore loser, he's doing no different than what Al Gore did in 2000.
But I think it's different. There was actual, from everything, again, I was 3 in 2000. Everything that I've read and researched, they were able to come up with some actual legitimate proof in Florida. What we're seeing here is there hasn't been any straight up proof out yet. And I think that it's going to get to the point where, and we're already starting to see it, where members of Congress in the Republican Party are going to have to start distancing themselves from Trump, because whether he wins these lawsuits or not, there is a time after a Trump presidency, after a Trump, and these people in Congress do want to try and keep their seats if they can, in the midterms and in the coming years, and they cannot go down with the ship. They are probably thinking in their minds, if this continues to lay out like there really isn't any actual solid evidence here.
Well, Jackie, what the Republicans really need to do is, one, when the dust settles, we need to get back to work. We need to remember our contract with America.
Getting back to, that's the thing. A lot of Republicans on the ground, it does, and I said this in our group chat earlier, unless the Republicans out there now, unless you are an election lawyer or you want to, or you're going to come forward with concrete evidence of voter fraud, you're not doing anything that's constructive and helpful right now. You're more than welcome to donate money to the campaign, but sitting outside of these voting, these polling places waiting to try and get them to stop counting the votes isn't helping. Whereas there are people already mobilizing to help with the runoff in Georgia who are already looking ahead to the midterms. And we need to keep moving forward, because these lawsuits are going to play out the way that they will.
But Jackie, we are able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We're Republicans.
I'm agreed. I think that people can.
We are Windows 95 multitasking
and making their voices heard. But at the same time, if you want to actually look ahead to something to be actionable on, then we look ahead. And again, there is January 5th is not as far away as you think. There is going to
No.
be a one-off election.
And let me tell you, and I'll tell you this right now, Jackie. People can record this. I said this in 1992, and people said I was on crack. 1992, I said we're in 94. We are going to take the House. We're going to take the Senate back. We're going to take majority of the governorships back. And you know what happened in 1992, 94? We took the House. We took the Senate. We took majority of the governorships in state houses around the country.
And we can do that in 2022 and 2024 if we actually start working on those races, which is what I think that the most of the Republicans should be focusing on right now.
But I mean, it's fine to go and fight the legitimate battles.
Yeah.
But don't waste our time and our money and our efforts on these battles that we are not going to win, where there's no legal basis to go there. You just don't just throw the lawsuits and all this stuff up there to see what sticks. Have something there, because I think overall it does hurt the party if you're constantly niggling away at this. And we do, as you said, I mean, we've got this January 5th, race, which is crucial. It's critical that we win those 2 seats.
We need to win both of those seats.
I don't think people are understanding the implications of what happens if we do not win both of those seats.
No, I agree, but I think the distinction here is I think we're jumping the gun a little bit. So, and I say that for one reason, because I don't think you can kind of blame the president's reaction so far for the fact that he doesn't have, or I assume, and I really don't know, because we don't know anything. And I think that's the real crux of the problem here, is because I don't know if they have any access to any more information than you and I have at this point.
And
I don't want to say that they're jumping the gun and that they're harping on this too long, because nothing's finalized, nor is there any, there hasn't really been any opportunity to dig up any direct evidence yet if they don't have access to the ballots that are still being counted. So I think there's where the distinction kind of lies also with the Gore comparison too, is that I think we're still pretty early in this before we start saying, you need to stop harping on it. Now, if we're talking 2 weeks from now, then maybe yes, then I'm 100% on board with what you're saying. I do agree in the importance of those runoffs. So that doesn't take away from the initial thing that I'm saying, because I think at least if we can get Perdue there, that's going to help and obviously be a really good thing for us moving forward as we look to the elections in the future here. But it's kind of hard to blame the president this exact second, because they elected him to be a fighter. I mean, most people understand who Donald Trump is and what he stands for. And at this point, his reaction to this and the way that he's conducted himself, it's not surprising. I think if we're talking a couple weeks from now and he's still having the same reaction.
We're only on the fourth day. We're only
exactly.
at the fourth day.
On the fourth day. If we're talking a couple weeks from now, then yeah, absolutely 100%.
If we're at Thanksgiving and we're talking about this, there's
no point in beating a dead horse here, especially if we don't have any direct evidence for legal grounds here moving forward. But people expect Donald Trump to fight this. The people that elected him are the people that are frustrated so far with the lack of transparency and information that they've seen being left in the dark, and have watched slowly on television each day as they're getting different news outlets to report what they believe to be the numbers of the candidate they elected in battleground states to get an actual result of the president. So I can't blame people for being frustrated. I agree with Jackie. Standing outside a polling place and yelling at people counting ballots is not going to do anybody any good. And I hold that same logic when it comes to most sorts of protests as a whole, regardless if they're election based or not. I don't think they're very productive.
Can I ask you a question, Chris, real quick?
Yeah.
Do you think the president was premature in declaring victory in certain key states, or do you think that was just his nature and we should just accept that? And do you think there's any fallout for that?
I think it was a political move. I think he saw the writing on the wall, and I think everyone saw the writing on the wall. I don't buy that everybody was surprised to see it flip the other way into the night. And then,
but here's something else. Arizona
candidates saying who's winning. I think at that point he saw what was happening, and this was going to be the basis for him to have the reaction he's having right now, and to give him justified means to do what he's doing. That's how I saw it.
Okay.
And Chris, let me give people's Exhibit A, the great state of Arizona. Election night, they, gave the win to Joe Biden. They still have, but President Trump is making major strides, and he could pull off and flip Arizona. It might be too little, too late. But my point is,
It's too late.
I also said this earlier, regardless of what happens to the rest of the states, I think it is very much far-fetched to think that Trump could sweep the board at this point. I would still just to see what happened. Would love to see him flip Arizona, just because I really want to see the reaction from the Fox News decision desk who quadrupled down.
That poor guy kept getting pulled out for segments to get.
Are you sure though? Are you sure though?
Some poor guy that was making decisions behind a door at the end of the day was just.
It's probably some intern at Fox
But
News that was doing that.
real quick though, and I'll stop. But I think we have to, when we're talking about Arizona here and what we think the result's going to be, I think we have to walk a fine line of not being hypocritical. Because I think at the same time as we're saying we don't trust what's happening in Georgia, we don't trust what's happening in Pennsylvania, we can't also just say, yes, but we're going to trust what's happening late in the decision in Arizona, though, if it goes in our favor. So I think at this point, I think Arizona's a foregone conclusion. I think it's done. I think Nevada's done. I think Pennsylvania and Georgia, unfortunately, are going to have the result that we're going to see so far.
And now, here's one thing I do want to say is I'm not throwing in the towel yet. We're only at day 4. We went to December. We went to December.
Fighting on, Dwight.
We went to December 12th for George Bush v. Al Gore.
And there's a definitive deadline.
Yeah.
They have to have this done because they've got to get to electoral college by the middle of by December.
Yeah.
So there's an end date on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll admit there are parts about the electoral college that still confuse the crap out of me. So tell me if I'm a little confused here. So like obviously people are saying when a certain state leans one way or another, that means that this person's getting those votes for sure. But my understanding is what you're electing, you're not saying these votes are all going automatically that person. These votes are for us to elect these electoral college members to go in and vote.
Right.
Yeah, and
so hypothetically speaking, and again, tell me if this is totally off base, just based on my understanding of the electoral college. Georgia flips to Biden, so their electoral votes, all 16, 11, whatever they are, those all go to Biden. If I'm one of those people who's like, I'm a Georgia Biden electoral college person, and I go in and I'm voting in the electoral college, and I decide, actually, I feel like I want to vote for Trump because for whatever reason, maybe something big happens with the Hunter Biden laptop. I don't know. Let's say that happens. And I'm from Georgia and I'm representing the electoral college. Could I theoretically vote for Trump?
Yes, you can. Because let me tell you, in 2000, Bob Beckel, the former member of the Five, the alcoholic and racist, Bob Beckel, he basically made claims that he was going to go around and try to flip electoral college members around the country to throw the whole thing into the United States House of Representatives by flipping a few electors here, a few electors there. And
I thought of that today because I was watching because they were saying, this is how the math shook out in 2016. And then I think it was something like 5 Hillary Clinton electoral college votes ended up going the other way or vice versa, whatever it was. So that made me think, and again, I don't know if this is something that's happening, but is there another strategy there that the Trump campaign isn't pursuing, is that if sometime between now and when the electoral college meets, there is some huge blow up that basically proves that Joe Biden knew everything that was going on with Hunter for sure and whatever, can those people in the electoral college decide, oh, wait, maybe we don't actually want to vote for this person?
Well, unfortunately, after 2000, a lot of state legislators did say you had to vote the way the popular vote in your state went.
Okay, so is that where that? Okay.
Yeah, that's where.
I mean, those are called faithless electors.
Yeah.
So, and depending upon what's going on here, I mean, some states do it. I pulled up an article here from Fortune. Electors in 14 states, including Iowa and Michigan, it says here, would see their vote canceled if they don't cast it for the statewide winner.
But cancel just means
those state laws were upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court in July when it ruled on a case like that. So, and Supreme Court also deemed state penalties on unfaithful electors are legal. 5 states penalize unfaithful electors with fines. So there are ramifications too. I mean, you can do it in some states, but there could be some severe penalties if you actually do that.
I believe Colorado is one of those states where they can vote their conscience in theory.
But I'm curious what that word canceled means, because if enough people vote the other way that they're faithless electors and their vote gets canceled, does that mean that they just don't count and then there isn't enough for someone to get 270?
No, it'd be like, how during the Civil War, we did have a presidential election with half the country.
It would just be majority. I'm going to assume that if they even if they tried to vote for the other candidate or another candidate, they would say, okay, your vote's canceled. You're going to get a fine. And by the way, that vote's going to go the way it's supposed to go. nevertheless, you as a person, your vote is canceled, but we are basically going to reassign it anyway. So they're trying to avoid having that, but that started to become a question in the last few elections about people who were not so sure they wanted to vote for the person they were supposed to be voting for when it came time for the Electoral College. So
Jackie, I was going to say, go ahead.
go ahead.
My understanding too is that there was an effort, I think a bipartisan effort, and I forget who the president was at the time, to kind of repeal the Electoral College. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that a lot of states have a compact that they want to go towards just a popular vote, straight popular vote, but they're not going to put that to a force until enough states actually adopt that. But the thought process is that, if all the states together that are part of this compact say, okay, we're going to use the popular vote, and the popular vote happens to go whatever direction, they will vote with the popular vote as a whole, not just within their state.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's not yet in effect, but that's kind of like people are trying to work towards that
They
too.
want to turn us into a mobocracy, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple things with that there, Jeff, too. One is that there is a compact that's going on that has been passed in a lot of states, but it doesn't go into effect technically until they reach 270. Representing 270 electoral votes, then they become the majority, then they can do that. However, also, there are states that have been putting on the ballot, apparently, or trying to put on a ballot that very question, where the legislature may have passed it, but it didn't go to the popular vote didn't go to the voters, where it's actually being pushed to the voters. So the voters could actually, even if the state legislature said, yeah, we want to be part of that compact, if it actually makes it to the ballot and the voters reject it, they're gone again. Then they pull back. And then we have Nebraska and Maine, which are two states that also
Have congressional districts.
by district. So there's another little wrinkle that's in there as well.
I find that to be idiotic, quite frankly.
It gets confusing.
It does, and it messes with my
issue.
it messes with my 270 to win map, quite frankly. But here's what I think. Okay, first of all, eliminate the Electoral College would turn us into a mobocracy. We're not a mobocracy. We're a republic. We're not. The reason the founding fathers is to prevent a lunatic from becoming president. Is for all intents and purposes. We wouldn't want to have Attila Hun, even if he won the popular, but we wouldn't want Attila Hun to be president of the United States. Of course not. And the fact that we've been using the Electoral College, this is basically a way and what would happen if we got rid of the Electoral College, Don, it would be like the great state of Maryland. If you see Maryland, which is, overall in gubernatorial races, Senate races, the 95 corridor is heavily represented by, if we had an electoral system here, maybe we'd have more Republicans elected governor than maybe 3 in my lifetime, Actually, no, 2 in my lifetime.
I was going to ask, which gerrymandered district in Maryland are you talking about?
Let's see. Well, District 3 comes to mind. District 8.
Which cookie cutter cutout of a district are you?
District 6. Because if you take Maryland, Maryland looks like a gun, as you know, right? And you have the center, the trigger part is all blue. The silencer is red, and the barrel is red, and the handle is red, but the trigger area is blue.
So to your point, Dwight, you could actually say that, if we actually separate it into congressional districts, it might actually be more representative in terms of the actual voting, because we have a lot of the rural districts voting Republican and a lot of the popular cities voting Democratic. So if you actually broke it down into population centers, it might actually be more represented about
President Trump would have
the
gotten
whole
one delegate
national.
out of Maryland.
I'm sorry?
President Trump would have gotten 1 delegate out of Maryland, maybe 2. No, 1, because the way they drew 6 and 8, which go from, District 6 used to be a Republican, a little history lesson for non-Marylanders. District 6 used to be all across Western Maryland to the northern Baltimore. And then we had District 1 that went all the way to the shore and went down. And those were 2 bright red Republicans. Then we had District 5. Is it 5? Which is Johnny Ray? What race? What was it? 5 that Johnny Ray Sallings was running in, or was that 2?
5 was Chris. Hold on.
Yeah, 5 was Chris, but Dutch Ruppersberger's district used to be Bob Ehrlich's district, which was a solid Republican district. There was another woman named Helen DeLeach Bentley, who, by the way, I get flack for stuff that I've said. She said this on the floor. She said she stands with her brother Slobodan Milosevic. I mean, I have never said that, but she has.
So, but anyway, to your point, Dwight, I mean,
Make your point.
even if you had a few districts that voted red in Maryland, that's less than the whole state.
Yeah.
I mean, would that not be a reasonable compromise in some cases to have it even more segmented?
No, I like the way the electoral college works. See what would happen. California, New York, Illinois, Florida, and Texas would be basically calling all the shots. Pennsylvania, basically.
They wouldn't have any more or less. They would just be segmented into different areas. So California, instead of being all blue, because California is going to be blue from now until something miraculous happens. So instead of having all of
When it
those,
falls off into the ocean.
instead of having all those, voting districts be blue, if you actually segment it into smaller districts, you might have a few that are red. And again, it goes both ways, but would that actually be more representative of, the actual population centers? Because there are red districts within California. It's just, you look at the major centers and it's Democratic.
Well, I want to ask this though about the electoral college though. I mean, part of this movement really is, it really picked up speed to dismantle or reform it because of 2016, how Hillary won the popular vote by a fairly large margin, and then but lost electoral. So that really got the Democrats, the liberals, steamed. Do you think some of that is taken out, some of the wind is out of their sails because Biden is going to win the popular vote and the electoral college vote?
No,
course it is.
I don't think it is, because I've still seen a bunch of people on my Facebook saying, can you imagine how much simpler this would have been if we just had a simple majority win?
Those people are rubes and idiots. I hate to say it.
Yeah, it's like, I don't have the time to sit there and explain to them, no, because then California and New York would decide every election, and that's not really great.
Well, those are the same people who hate populists, right? Right.
Well, here's something I looked up this today because I just kind of wanted to see what would happen where we're looking, because we're going to have a redistricting. The census is going to cause a redistricting across the country. So we're going to have in 2022 a different map for congressional races, and then 2024 it'll affect the electoral college. So I went through and so this goes back to earlier this year before the census was taken. So this was a prediction as of January as to what was thought was going to happen. So California, Minnesota, Illinois, New York, Rhode Island, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Alabama, and West Virginia were all expected to lose one electoral vote. Gaining electoral votes, one would be Oregon, Arizona, Montana, Colorado, and North Carolina. Gaining 2, Florida. Gaining 3, Texas. So I basically calculated this out, saying that where the blue is really blue now. I mean, you're giving the blue wall back. In essence, it looks like it's a +4 for the red states, in essence, net. So that's a good thing. I mean, if you see Florida and Texas, those are pretty good for us. And I think even in 2 years and 4 years, that's a positive trend, because redistricting is going to be better for us, going forward, particularly since we control so many state houses.
Texas, Florida,
It is, and I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly here though, but in how many situations is +4 electoral college votes really going to do us any favors?
You never know. Here's an interesting thing though. 70.
Educate me. I am young. This is my second presidential.
Here's one thing that is interesting though. With that calculation, 72 electoral votes will be in Texas and Florida. That's huge.
Okay. That is huge. That helps, because to me, I'm just thinking, even looking at
4 doesn't seem like a big number when you're talking about 500.
Even now, if we're going by Fox News's polling, which again has called Arizona when no other whatever has, he's still 6 away. So when you say 4, it's like, does that really help?
But here's the other point about the whole thing is California. We're going to lose, they're going to, because the way California is, you're going to put a couple Democrats in districts with each other. When they have to do reapportionment, they're not going to be able to do what they would have done, let's say, if it was a 50-50 state, where they go, let's just dip into the Republican areas, because it's pretty, New York's got the same issues. I know they're going to try and probably, take Staten Island out, take out New York 2, which is now it's Congressman-elect Garbarino's district. They'll try and take out, they'll try and maybe take Manhattan, stretch it out those districts more into Long Island to give it more blueness and so on.
Right. I mean, redistricting aside, and I think I said this on Wednesday when we were doing our coverage, I said, I think it's going to be really interesting over the coming years, maybe not in the short run, but in the long run, with the number of people that are fleeing out of New York and California because they don't like the way that the liberal policies have been affecting their state.
Yeah.
And it's predominantly liberals that are leaving these places. It'll be really interesting to see that if there is a possibility in the future that California could potentially become a red state, and maybe New York to an extent as well.
Before.
New
Well,
York-
look, I mean, that's an interesting theory there, Jackie, because the flip side of that, though, which is one of my major
What then
concerns,
becomes a blue state?
is where they're moving to. So, like with California and the tech industry, where they're saying you don't have to ever come back to work, in the office, or you can work remotely, but you go to get a 20% pay cut or whatever. What are a lot of those guys doing? They're moving to Utah, Idaho, Arizona. They're moving to places where they figure they can get lower taxes, cheaper housing, just better cost of living.
But why are those places offering it?
So they are starting to change the makeup of those. So those states are slowly but surely.
in our lifetime, we saw Nevada was this reliable Republican state when you had Governor Laxalt, Senator Laxalt.
And that's the thing. But all the places deciding these elections that we're seeing right now are very much urban areas. And Don, to your point, as working from home, and I think honestly, I'm getting a survey on Monday. I think that might actually, they're basically asking us if is putting working from home permanently on the table. But as we start to see, I think, a mass exodus from cities, I think we're going to start seeing that over time, and those populations spread out. I really hope that those very much liberal people who are starting to move to Republican states because of the greener pastures in terms of taxes and property value and everything like that really do question, I wonder why it is that these states are like that, and maybe hopefully see the light that that's because they are Republican run states. And I'm hoping that they then, as the population spread out and all of our votes aren't dependent on certain state outcomes aren't dependent on one or two cities in that state, I think that we could see over time a huge change in the way that votes actually do matter in certain districts.
But I think to that point, I mean, I think that really begs the question then, right? If you've got people coming from blue states, and like predominantly California is obviously your go-to pick every time, and then you look at maybe where they go, and we've seen a lot recently to Texas, and that's, I think, why you can see a lot of change to Texas as well as, and it's not just California, but it's the main point.
North Carolina has also changed.
North Carolina is a good example too, but I think what it comes down to on our part is when you look at this is you can't control where people are moving, and obviously you understand if they go to places, if it benefits them financially or their families, and it's completely understandable. But I think it's our job as Republicans then to adapt with the times too. I think at that point, if you've got people coming to your state, you have to make a point to evolve as a party as well too. We can't necessarily just stand pat on everything we've ever done. I mean, we have to evolve when it comes to the times as well too, and appeal to those people the best we can.
Agreed.
So we're getting low on time here, but I mean, what do you think is like the net, kind of the net effect of this election? I mean, this is, we're going to wind up in all likelihood with a divided government. I'm going to say that the Senate will stay in Republican hands. I think the runoff in Georgia is actually a favorable thing for us. Without a presidential election, I think the runoff is better for Republicans, than for the Democrats. So I think we'll retain at least one of the seats, if not both of those seats. After Loeffler's running against, she's running against someone who's basically a minister who's never really run for political office. I think even with her inexperience, but as a politician, but her experience as a business person, I think she can still win them over, even if Georgia winds up going blue for Biden in the end. But what kind of effect does this have on the Republican Party going forward? I mean, we made some inroads on the House, right? After all those pollsters that Dwight was talking about earlier, they were talking about 10 or 15. I mean, Nancy Pelosi was out there thinking like, I'm going to increase my majority. I'm going to be a stronger leader. And she went completely backwards.
She's going to be lucky to be speaker.
Even her position is a little tenuous. I think she still wins, but I think, she's now got to deal with a lot more progressives that are going to say, you've just led us into this election wherever we thought was going to be a blue wave. We were thinking 10 or 15 and we went back 5, 6, 7. That's not good.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see here is like the main positive we can take from Election Day is that we saw a really good thing for the Republicans as a whole nationally. And that trickled down from the House, Senate, as well as into local elections and local legislatures as well. Mm-hmm. North Carolina, I can attest to the fact that what we saw is that essentially in redistricting, there were 2 seats that were open for Democrats for the most part, and they only netted 1. and then we gained 3 in the House, which was completely just out of the blue. And then
How'd you guys do in Mecklenburg County, by the way? That's always
we got a seat in the state house in Mecklenburg County.
that is phenomenal because that's Charlotte, and that's
Yeah,
a very
We got
and the
one in
number
Wake
of
County as well
people-
too.
really.
hmm
the number
nice.
of people questioning, because I'm seeing this on the media, on the left, a lot of the leftist media are saying, all these Black people saying that they're personally offended by the record number of Black people that voted for Trump. Same with the Latino vote. Is instead of whining about it, saying that they're betraying their own people and that they're full of self-hatred, maybe questioning why it is that these minorities are actually making the conscious decision that they are very able to make, despite what Chelsea Handler thinks, making the decision to vote with the Republicans, and
Yeah.
maybe questioning if maybe their policies aren't what's best for minorities, even though they keep trying to talk down to them as if they are.
Well,
And
And I think that's another big takeaway from this election that we're
real quick, and I'll finish up. I just think to kind of talk about what I was saying before about the national impact of what we saw from election night is that we're going to see, likely, like Don said, we're going to see the Senate likely stay hold Republicans. You're going to see the runoff in Georgia, which I really think is going to touch on a lot with voter fatigue. I think we're going to see a lot of we're going to see likely both, if not Purdue, at least come out of there. And I don't think you're going to see the same turnout you just saw, obviously. But it kind of just comes down to, at this point, what is this going to do from a national level now that you're going to have a Democratic House, you're going to have a Republican Senate, and you're likely going to have a Democratic president? I think overall, if you're Joe Biden, you're thrilled, because I really think at the end of the day, you're not going to have anything crazy coming from the House that's going to end up on your desk. You're going to have the Senate as the buffer. And at this point, I don't really see too much he's going to have to deal with coming from the legislature, from Congress at this point. And you're not going to see your AOC type radical stuff coming before President Biden's desk for a signature, whether it's the Green New Deal or anything close to it. You're going to have McConnell in the Senate shutting all that down. And there's going to be a good chance that it's going to be more, hopefully, theoretically, less radical bipartisan type things. But we all know how that works up there.
You're right, Chris. I mean, honestly, I think that the Republicans keeping the Senate is the best thing that Joe Biden could hope for, because it means he's not going to be forced in a position where he's going to need to choose between the progressive left and the moderate left. Because
he's not. By the way, Jackie, that's a misnomer. He would not choose. He would support every radical lefty agenda there is.
But it's that he will not. He's safe from having to actually do that and be exposed in that way of having and potentially.
I do not think for a minute Joe Biden
and he can blame the fact that this stuff doesn't get passed because it's McConnell and companies.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that, but the Senate rejected it, and now so that gives them some safety net there.
Jeff, do you want to jump in? I think I cut you off before I saw you.
That's okay. I was gonna say, we're running a little short in time, so I want to have a little bit more of a closing thought, because I've been thinking a long time of I tend to be more moderate in terms of the Republican core values, but I really believe in core principles. I think of the key of GOP principles that, yes, I believe in America first, but I believe in America independence. I think a lot of our issues is the fact we depend upon other countries for certain products, and for certain for Middle East for oil, for China for products and such. If we really want to gain our say sovereignty in the economic world, I think we need to really push America to regenerate and reinvent ourselves in terms of the industry. And to your point about California, I think California can be a red state again. I mean, it was under Nixon, because Nixon promoted nuclear technology, and there are a lot of nuclear jobs created in California. And so I think if the California economy has shifted. Before it was Palo Alto and Sunnyvale and all those areas that are tech heavy. You had Intel and other companies based out of there, and then it's switched now towards more like a media kind of where Facebook and Twitter and other places are kind of housed there, and the whole kind of vibe has changed. But again, if we really want to say, okay, listen, there's next gen energy just across the corner. Let's really invest as a country into this technology. Let's get our superconducting super collider projects back on the board. Let's get potentially deep space projects back on the board. Let's really put some people and some brains behind this, and let's devote some resources to it. And then places like California would be spurred by the government to say, okay, let's do research funding. I think that would tend to shift the economy towards more of the Republican core value mentality. And I think that would potentially cause California to shift and appreciate the value of, I say good old fashioned business, but the kind of bootstrap business where you invent something and you profit from the invention. There's so much now that is like, it's like the soft economy. It's like, Google, Facebook, Twitter, these are not products. They're just, these are platforms, but they're profitable, and it's just the way we do business now. But, again, I'm kind of rambling on here, but the point is that I think there is a path forward, but it has to be something that we're really committed to, and can really see, the future for. Because I think, again, there is a need for independence from China for certain materials. They have monopoly on the rare earth materials. Like I said, I think next gen fission and fusion reactors are just around the corner. But if we really don't step on it, we're going to lose that momentum, and we're going to be buying our own technology from other countries. So again, that's my concern, is the fact that we're so close. I mean, America was built upon inventors, and our technology has been second to none for the longest time, but we've not really committed our resources to keeping up that momentum. So again, that's kind of my spiel for what I think would be a potential, long-term solution for our party.
All right. Well, there's so much more that could be said tonight, but we're going to move into final thoughts. I'm going to go first because I think this is something that really, really needs to be said. So for all the people out there who have been hearing about this conspiracy theory, which I've now learned is called Operation Death Blossom, that the Department of Homeland Security actually printed all these ballots and there's watermarks on them, that has been debunked and proven to be a QAnon thing. And seriously, please don't put all your eggs in that basket, because I really don't think that's a real thing. Please, 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 please don't keep spreading that, because I keep seeing it pop up and people keep sending it to me, and it's guys, no. And then my other closing thought is, because again, we didn't really get to talk about this, and it has not been 100% proven true yet, but again, 2020, anything can happen. I read yesterday that Vladimir Putin stepping down because he has Parkinson's. Again, we'll see if that turns out to be true, but it's 2020, so anything's possible. Those are my final thoughts. Chris, what do you have?
Oh man, I gotta follow the Putin reference.
She was dying to get that in there.
I added that to the email chain.
You just narrated final thoughts and jumped right into it and threw a Putin reference, and now I'm number two. What I'll leave with is this, and it does kind of talk a little bit about what Jackie talked about. I won't get into too many specifics, but what I have seen, at least from my experience over the last few days, is there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people jumping to conclusions, and I think I would just caution everyone, whether it's on this show or people we know in general that follow politics, care about politics, and that are monitoring this situation closely, is to just wade with caution. Don't be the person to jump all over a conspiracy. Don't be the person to jump all over a video with no context. This process is going to play out the way it's going to play out, and if there's actual legal arguments and via direct evidence of what we find and see here moving forward, then we need to support that. We need to support the investigation into it. Absolutely 110%. And we shouldn't let our gut feeling stop us from doing that. However, that has to come with a caveat and a contingency here, is that we're doing ourselves a disservice if we're jumping on every little crux and crumb that we see that favors our overall narrative as to how we feel about this. Is that we really have to be smart in picking our battles if we want to have any legitimate argument with anyone on the other side, or your everyday person here. Is that you can't just jump all over the first video you see. You can't use just Twitter, Facebook, and whatever sort of third-party sites, and down the rabbit hole you go into conspiracy theories and legitimate or non-legitimate. And it does the party a disservice. It does a lot of people a disservice. It does our overall election system a disservice. So I will say that, and then I'll end it on this, is that I think I touched on a little bit before, is that there was positives despite what we saw just from this presidential election. Is I think Republicans have set themselves up really well going into these next elections that we see in the next couple of years here moving forward, whether it's presidential or before, is that we've seen a huge failure that we saw of this blue wave. And I think we saw a really good thing for our whole system here, is that we saw how money doesn't necessarily decide elections as much as we think, at least when it comes from outside states or outside entities throwing money at candidates to defeat others. Is that we saw that from the Lindsey Graham election. We saw that from the McConnell election. We saw it here locally. We've seen it for our Senate races and House races here as well, too, is that we've seen the fact that voters have decided those people, and we've been able, as Republicans, to kind of build from the ground up here, especially moving forward after, whether it is after a Trump administration here moving forward. So we have to identify that as the positive here. And then, like I said before, make sure we're smart, make sure we're calculated here as we dive into this rabbit hole that could possibly be some sort of election issue.
Yeah. And Chris, I'll tack on to your first point. Maybe turn off the internet for a little bit. Turn off, go for a walk. It's in the 70s this weekend. Read a book. Take a nap. Don't watch. Don't be like me and stay up until 2 a.m. 2 nights in a row and then try to work the next day. Just don't do it. It's not healthy. Jeff, do you have another closing thought?
Yeah, I think Chris pretty much said everything that I was going to think of, but I was going to say, just to add, don't confuse patriotism with fanaticism. We're all patriots. We all want this country to succeed. Let's moderate how fanatical we are with some of our beliefs. Let's just kind of just take a chill pill, let the system work. It's worked before. We've had, many times of turmoil. This country's gone through a lot. It has the strength to succeed. We just need to let it do its process. As been said.
Okay, I got some breaking news, everyone, real quick. Supreme Court Justice Alito rules any ballots received after 8 p.m. on Election Day in Pennsylvania be segregated and secured. Here's what that means. Then I got to open it up to see more. But if you go to foxnews.com, it's breaking news.
Secure doesn't mean thrown out yet, so we'll see how that plays out.
Yes.
Yeah, they're already segmenting that mail, if I know. But Anyway, I was gonna say, just let's let the system work, as it's intended. If there's disputes, let them go through the proper channels. But this is going to be a multi-day process. Let it do its thing. Let's not get too anxious about knowing the result, because we will know eventually. Let's just all to have a little patience.
I hate that I'm being that guy and tacking on a comment on everyone else's comments.
Yeah.
But
It's not the time you're doing it, so
I know.
Who do you think
But I'm
you
gonna
are,
do
me?
it anyway. But Jeff's point about patriotism, whatever, is we saw all these people in 2016 saying, I hope Trump fails. And I don't think that anybody should be going into this saying, I hope Biden proves us right and fails as a president. I think, everybody wants our
That's
country
what
to
I'm
do
saying.
well. We should
Yeah.
not hope that Biden fails, or that it should, for whatever reason, he's not president, Kamala Harris is, that she fails. We should all want this country to be strong and do well. So nobody hope for his failure, because that doesn't help any of us. All right, Dwight, what are your
Yes.
thoughts?
Okay, I've got a couple final thoughts. Number one,
I figured.
as a student of history, look, if hypothetically President Trump loses, okay, it's not the end of the world. This is not 2008. I remember from my history books and from stuff my grandparents, my dad told me, the 1974 election for Congress, the Republicans took a bloodbath. That was after the resignation of President Nixon. And President Jerry Ford became president for the last 2 years and that was bad. We were down, but look what happened. 4 years later, President Reagan is elected president of the United States. We've defeated the Cold War. We won the Cold War. We beat the commies. We liberated Grenada, Angola, Nicaragua, El Salvador. We beat back the Sandinistas and socialists and communists. Then we had President Bush. Then we had Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton, people thought, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Here's the thing: back when President Bill Clinton became president, the Democrats and the Republicans controlled the House and Senate. Then the House was under their thumb for almost 40 years in 1992. That's why people said I was on crack in 1992. I said in 1994, we're taking the House and the Senate back, state legislatures and the governorships around the country. Until 1994, majority of the governorships were controlled by Democrats. Majority of the state legislatures were controlled by Democrats. We flipped that in 94. And now look where we are today. Even if President Trump loses, we will live to fight another day. We are the Republican Party. We are the grand old party, and we're the grand old party for a reason, because we have stayed the test of time. We basically showed Barack Hussein Obama, who in 2000, in 2010, we took the House back. In 2012, we took the Senate and the House. And then in 2016, in 2014, when people were writing the obituaries in Maryland for actually it was 2010, people writing the obituaries for the Maryland Republican Party and Republican parties around the country. Look what happened. 4 years later, Governor Hogan was elected governor. We took majority of the county executives and county commissioner slots in the state of Maryland. The Republican Party is not dead. We're nowhere near dead. We're not even on life support. If anything, in 2022, we'll have a stronger majority. We'll have a bigger majority in the Senate. We'll take the House back. And we get to, and considering last Tuesday's results, we control majority of the legislatures and governorships, and redistricting is going to be under our control. In many states, except our state of Maryland, where the Democrats, they don't even have a good sense of having a redistricting commission to do the redistricting like they just voted in Virginia. But at the end of the day, we will emerge from this as a stronger Republican Party. And the fact that we won seats like we retained Will Hurd's seat, and we retained Congressman King's seat. We took out a 30-year entrenched Democrat in Minnesota. We're still counting votes, but we may be knocking off Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. We will be taking back the old Eric Cantor, Dave Brat seat. It's not over, and it's kind of to be continued. I know a lot of folks, think the world's going to end if President Trump is not in the White House. No, it's not going to end. We will go on. We have lived through 8 years of Bill Clinton, 8 years of Barack Obama. We are smarter than the Democrats. We, believe in the American dream. We believe in American exceptionalism. We are the Republican Party, and we're the party of new ideas. The Democrats haven't had a new idea in over 40 years, and that is my rant, and that I'm done. That is my final thought.
And done.
Amen.
Bring us home.
Jackie, you got a comment? No.
I think you said everything.
He's tired of being that guy.
I have no other words to add on to that many words, and I usually am not left speechless.
Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat surprised that Dwight said that, but I was going to say some of those things, but in far fewer words to
I
begin
was
with.
channeling Winston Churchill.
But you're right. I mean, that was one of the things I was going to say. It's just that there has been a lot of this. The world is going to end if Donald Trump loses. But yes, we live. That's what they were saying with Obama and others. It's fine. We're fine. One of the things I think about this is just that, having Joe Biden elected, I'm like, I cannot think of any reason right now, why 4 years from now people are going to be motivated to reelect Joe Biden. I just don't see what he is going to be able to accomplish. He's ridden into office really on the "I'm not the Donald Trump" candidacy. That's what's really gotten him here. So I don't think there's much hope for Biden past one term. And I don't think that Harris, would be a viable alternative, even if she wound up taking over for him for some reason.
She'll be the Jerry Ford of the Democrat Party.
I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, that one I do have to add on to, because I don't think most people think there's going to be a Joe Biden on the ballot after 1 year, but that's me.
Yeah. What do the
That-
betting
yeah.
lines say?
The other thing is I just want to go local and just say that I'm glad at least we got a temporary reprieve in Montgomery County from the pullback, the step back on COVID, on the restrictions going on the restaurants, the houses of worship. The vote takes place again, I guess, on Tuesday. I'm crossing my fingers that this delay has made the county council think that maybe it might not be a good idea, that they might actually kill what's left of the tax base if they do this. So, and how many businesses they would hurt if they went back to 25% restaurants and things like that. So I'm crossing my fingers, but this is that county that many of us live in. And it's just like, these are the times when I sometimes feel like, I wish I wasn't here, but there are a lot of other positives. So
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, Moko, do yourself a favor and go out to dinner this weekend, because you might not get another chance
Right.
to do so.
Yeah. There are a bunch of pizza places people should try. Gentlemen Gyms, I'm thinking of trying them out this week.
We'll post the list. Yeah, I'll close it off by saying, if anything good could come from a Biden presidency, we get to watch a number of SNL skits with Jim Carrey playing Joe Biden. So, we'll see how that pans out. That'll be fun. This has been Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. Obviously, we will probably have a lot more to talk about next Friday, seeing how all this starts to pan out through the rest of the week. Thank you to all of our guests and panel who have been on tonight. We will see you guys next week.